Good afternoon, everyone. This is Unit 6. My name is Lynn Simons, and I'm State District Court Judge in the great state of Nevada. But it's nice to see you, and I'm going to ask all of you to take a very deep breath right now.
Good. My name is Murray Snow, and I'm the Chief Judge for the Federal District Court in Arizona.
Good afternoon. My name is Tammy Waller, and I am the Director for K-12 Social Studies and World and Native Languages for the Arizona Department of Education.
Would you please introduce yourselves?
I am Levi Peterson. I'm a senior here at Green River High School.
I am Emma Christiansen, and I am also a senior here.
I am James King, and I also attend Green River High School. And over there is Mr. Cox, our wonderful teacher, and he's done a great job preparing us.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about what challenges might face American constitutional democracy in the 21st century. President Dwight D. Eisenhower said, "We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist." Do you agree or disagree, and why? Please discuss what disagreements did the founders have about a standing army, and are they relevant today? And to what extent should there be an international U.S. military presence? You may begin.
As with any part of our governmental system, if the military acquires too much power, it will compromise the integrity of the state.
The balance of powers is one of the most integral concepts of our democratic system. And if it fails to be maintained, it could have disastrous consequences.
Many countries have been overpowered by their militaries or allowed military powers to be used for nefarious means within their systems.
There is a long history of military coups and misuses of power beginning in ancient civilizations and persisting today. One long-standing instance of militarily seized power is Myanmar, where elections have been overruled in the name of maintaining order.
The idea of checks and balances is mostly commonly generalized to the three branches of the government. However, the idea of steadying power is beyond simply legislative, executive, and judicial. Keeping military power balanced and accountable both within itself and within the branches of our government protects our democracy.
For these reasons, we must agree with the statements of Eisenhower.
The founders of our nation say many possible issues with military power, particularly the concept of a standing military. Many founders, including Federalist James Madison and Anti-Federalist Samuel Adams, had a distaste for the idea of a standing army and preferred the use of a state-based militia.
There were few who considered a standing army, with standing armies often associated with tyranny, as seen by this quote from Elbridge Gerry, who claims, "Whenever governments mean to invade the rights and liberties of the people, they always attempt to destroy the militia in order to raise an army upon its ruins."
This stance seems contradictory to the current state of the U.S., which now houses one of the largest standing militaries in the world.
Within Federalist Papers 24 and 25, both written by Alexander Hamilton, he voices his concerns about not providing for a standing army.
If military powers remained in the hands of states, Hamilton claimed there would be a conflict between states, and that some states would face greater burdens in defending the country.
Other founders feared that creating a permanent military would make war less of a defense option instead of encouraging preferences towards offensive action.
It was also believed that it would give those who benefit from said military reason to promote war, and that power could be misused by the president.
Some of these concerns are less relevant today, but the concept of those who profit from wartime unfairly promoting it is still a possibility.
Today, the United States military has become the most powerful in the world. The first official atonement of the standing army was in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 12.
This clause permitted the president to control a standing army, with Congress controlling all of its funds.
Despite that, this army only consisted of around 800 soldiers.
The main change in practice and belief in the standing armies occurred during World War II, when it was necessary to build up a large military force within a short amount of time.
Rather than dismissing the majority of the army after World War II, they were kept as one of the United States' greatest defensive measures.
In addition to defense, the U.S. now uses the standing army for military presence, often in foreign countries. We have seen this in a variety of different areas throughout our nation's history.
Whether this foreign presence is warranted is often circumstantial, and because of the highly subjective nature, U.S. interference in the foreign affairs should be carefully asserted in each case.
This is prominently shown in countries such as Southern America.
Through all of these differences, we must make sure that we carefully assess each and every case to find what the best measure is in every single circumstance.
All right, thank you. Following up on what you said with regard to international presence, that it should be carefully asserted. Using the Spratly Islands, which are in the South China Sea, as an example, what are the positive and or negative aspects of a U.S. military presence there? And not necessarily a standing army, but also could be naval.
So our Navy in the South China Sea is currently there in order to essentially protect the land underneath the sea, as islands are being created by the Chinese government and attempted to claim the area off of the land that they are building. So because this is kind of uncharted territory, I think the United States being there is kind of limiting what China can say is their right or is their power, because we've never seen anything like this. We did establish, you own the oceans outside your borders, but we've never seen an individual country kind of creating borders in order to attain the land around, or the oceans around that area.
Often the best way for the US to use its military presence the most carefully as it can is to defend nations rather than to assert its own wishes upon other nations.
Emma put this perfectly by saying we should have a presence, like our military has a presence in the South China Sea, not so it can be used, but so that China knows we're there over the period of time that our diplomatic relations are solving an issue for this unprecedented circumstance that China has brought upon us.
To whom did the framers in the Constitution give control over the military? And was it sufficient to prevent the abuse of military power?
Well, the funds of the military were originally, when the standing army was first created, given to the Congress. The power to allot these funds was given to Congress. However, the military was always primarily commanded by the president themselves. This was supposed to create a balance, making it possible for the Congress to keep the president from having too much tyrannical power over army forces. However, certain framers of the Constitution originally believed that this would not be enough.
And so what did they do about it?
This is largely why we see legislation has the oversight power, is to keep the executive branch in check. So the executive power, while he disperses your military forces, the legislation has can declare war, and that is kind of how we see them checking this executive power.
But it is important to notice that even though we do have these checks and we do have these implemented areas, that it isn't working 100% at least. We do have this inefficiency in the spending of the military. We do have an inflated military budget, seemingly. So although we do have these limits in place, what we've done about it is essentially not yet a solved problem.
So the ability of different branches to both limit the funds and to check the president's use of the military has in some ways helped us, but there are many ways in which the US military should still be kept in check.
The military is one of the tools we use for our foreign policy. Besides the military, what are some tools that the United States has at its disposal to use for foreign policy?
Well, one of the major tools that the United States has is being the economic powerhouse that it is, and it become established as throughout the 1900s. So using those trade agreements is a powerful tool.
And we also see a vast amount of ambassadors representing the United States in foreign countries to negotiate deals and ease tensions and improve our diplomatic relations.
Economics, diplomacy, and trade routes are all very important. And in addition, we often work with a variety of other countries in certain organizations like the United Nations, which allow us to have better diplomatic relations with a variety of different nations.
And one of the darker things that fails to be brought up in a lot of these discussions is the use of America's CIA in these foreign countries and the interference in such things like South America's elections.
So turning domestically, should the government require all citizens to register for the Selective Service? Why or why not?
I believe that we have such a large standing army that the ability, and we have created a system where it can be a source of opportunity for many people in impoverished areas. So I do not believe that we have to use this draft process anymore, just because our army is so large.
There are many people who are perfectly willing to go into different areas of the military, and such things as a specialized forces, these people will do so willingly.
And even if we were to keep the Selective Service program, it should be in much more dire circumstances, not in any cases of war. Maybe a Selective Service program for if there's an invasion of the country or something outrageously serious, not if there was corruption in creating or having like interest in continuing a war that you can essentially just pull from all of the public in order to fund and continue going.
And I think this support largely went away, like with the Vietnam War, where people were pulled over for a war they didn't even know what they were fighting for. And that's where I believe the American public largely started questioning the Selective Service process.
If the need was sufficient, do you think it would be acceptable to have non-citizens serve in our military?
If we were in dire circumstances, ones where it were necessary to have more people within the services of the Army and other various military forces, then it would be plausible to enlist people who aren't citizens, as long as it was not something that was entirely against their will.
And we're already kind of seeing the United States indirectly use citizens of other nations. Like we have large training units overseas in the Middle East, helping our allies get the training and needing, and they're being used as kind of an extension of American relations.
In addition, at this point, the majority of military individuals, like the actual people out there on the field, are contracted by the U.S. government, not like through the actual U.S. military, so contracted and could be from other nations.
It is also worth noting, however, that the actual use of a standing military and individual people within the military is becoming less and less prevalent as technology is being furthered, because war is becoming more and more technological in nature and less focused on individual soldiers.
Under what circumstances, if any, do you believe the National Guard should be deployed domestically?
I believe in, so when there's mass unrest, we have been seeing the National Guard. When there's a prominent threat of individuals or citizens of America being harmed, and the individual states are not acting to protect their citizens or the people that they represent.
We should primarily, however, work not to use our military against our own citizens, since it is their job to protect us as individuals within this country.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now you can breathe again. So I enjoyed your presentation. You had a great pace and you complemented each other well. A lot of times we hear people that are talking so fast, we have a hard time keeping up, and you definitely weren't in that camp. And I liked how you wove in your theme, you know, the balance of power and checks and balances. And in answer to the question, you came back to that and you answered my question. If I offered some constructive criticism, it would be sometimes it's good to disagree, or at least vet the issue and then say why you don't necessarily agree to it. And to remember that our National Guard, I mean, at least in Nevada, they're doing all of our vaccines. And so it's a completely different use than military unrest. So I would keep that in mind, just sort of think outside the box from the initial answer, but I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I too enjoyed the presentation. You had some very good current examples. One of the examples that I thought that we would hear all day long would be Myanmar. I can't remember hearing it earlier, but you offered Myanmar as a good example of what happens when a military is not controlled by citizen population. That's a very good example. You did some nice contrasts and compare with federalists and anti-federalists. And you weren't afraid to, Levi, when you said it's clearly not working, and not at least 100, not 100% at least. I thought that was a nice concession in light of where your discussion had brought you, that there were still improvements that should be made. It's always a little easy to get carried away in conversation. I would just point out that a significant part of our current military is non-citizens of the United States, because the United States can't get enough people to enroll in the military. Something to think about. But all in all, I really enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I echo my colleagues. I also really enjoyed your discussion. It was more of a conversation, which I appreciated, where you kind of invited us into the topic with you. I thought you did a great job with your prepared statement. You covered the question, had good examples. You did a good job of building on each other. The one thing I would suggest is that you did a great job answering the question, but then provide some more examples. So using trade, I was really glad to hear you say trade is like a really important agent of foreign policy, but give an example of how you can use trade for foreign policy. But I thought you guys did a wonderful job, and I really appreciated your presentation, and I did learn something from it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you very much. And you know what? I enjoyed it as well. So with that, you are free to go to whatever is next for you. And I really hope that this weekend and this event had some actual meaning for you, because we get a lot out of it too. So good luck.
Thank you. Have a good evening.